Hello, and welcome to Passing Period. I'm your host, Mr. Meyerowitz, and today I will address the final question of this season. That's right. My campaign for America's favorite teacher came to an unfortunate end last night, but we made a lot of noise. I learned a lot of new skills, like how to upload something to YouTube. And there's a great deal of demand for more of this content and perhaps a future library for our school, even if the Planetary Society won't be plastering their nonprofit name on it. I appreciate all of your support from day one. And who knows, maybe Passing Period or other initiatives that I spawn uninvited will amount to something even more exciting than wearing the favorite teacher apple on my tie. We can do pretty awesome things together, and I'll be calling for your questions again soon. For now, I'm taking a break. My family, including my wife, my father, my two dogs, and my unknown number of cats, need my attention. When people go on campaign, they tend to neglect the people and pets that have far more value than a jumbo check and some photo ops. Stay tuned. There's so much more to come. Today's question comes from Vivian. She writes, in East of Eden, John Steinbeck makes an argument that humans have a choice to triumph over sin. Do you think it's easier or harder to choose goodness in modern society than in past ages? Wonderful question. Though I will challenge your premise a bit. Whether or not we believe that the biblical concept of sin, that is, of straying from God and from righteous behavior, is more significant than secular codes of ethics, modernity has not, in my view, increased our proclivity to violate established rules and customs. It's demonstrated in the book of Genesis, from which Steinbeck has derived his title and main characters. Even the best of us sin. God's test case, humans, Adam and Eve, ate from the forbidden tree. Noah, God's most righteous man during the deluge, was apparently a drunk. Moses, the liberator of the Hebrews from bondage, struck a rock when God instructed him to speak to it instead. Even God's most favored and upright individuals strayed from the holy path, precisely because they were endowed with free will and because they had inherited the original sin of the knowledge of good and evil from the first man. Even in the first chapters of the Bible, it's evident that God designed man to be rational, individualistic, and self-reliant. After all, if God created man in his own image, then it stands to reason that man should have full control over himself, dominion over the earth, and the right to agency and its consequences. Arguably, there's nothing fated in the Old Testament. The Hebrews, while offered the promised land, are not guaranteed it eternally, any more than Adam was guaranteed paradise. Old Testament characters, unlike the Greek tragic heroes who are cursed and fated from the beginning, can create their own paths and follow their own instincts and intuition. If we turn to another story about gardening, the French philosopher Voltaire crafted a delightful novella in 1759 called Candide, or Optimism, that features a young boy who was raised in a noble home, but through an illicit kiss with the Baron's daughter Cunegonde, is kicked out for being illegitimate and unworthy and must withstand the full spectrum of human vice and hostility, from exile to military conscription to humiliation to robbery to enslavement. He witnesses and occasionally perpetrates the deaths of others, friends as well as foes, and cannot escape the allure of gaining the wealth and status that have made man a wolf to man in the first place. At the end of the novel, depleted of all of his resources and reflecting on the purposelessness of life and suffering, Candide and his companions meet a Turk who lives on a few acres of land and seems content, seemingly the first satisfied individual in the entire cosmos. When asked how the Turk evades misery, want, and boredom, he replies that he cultivates his garden. That is, he takes ownership for the little things that he can control, ignores the ones that he cannot, and finds purpose in his own small actions that make his garden bloom. For Voltaire, the Garden of Eden is neither a privilege granted to one religious group or another. After all, Adam and Eve were not religious, but is something that we can create for ourselves using our own skills, care, and engagement in the here and now, rather than dreams of glory that always lead to subjugation, exploitation, and annihilation. For Voltaire, we can do right for ourselves and our fellow man if we settle down with them as equals, take pride in our labor, and enjoy not the power that we are granted by gods and kings, but the liberty that we grant ourselves. In 1947, another French writer, Albert Camus, wrote a similar, though even darker fable that demonstrated the power of individual action and its ability, albeit temporary, to provide meaning and value to himself and others. This novel, The Plague, or La Peste, features a community of individuals toiling and profiting under the secure dome of the Algerian sky, much like Candide in his noble palace of Thunder Ten Tronckh, when a virulent plague that resembles the Black Death begins affecting the rats. Then a few people, and then engenders panic and apocalyptic destruction across the community. The safe dome of capitalism is torn off, and old individualistic notions of profit, competition, and status become irrelevant in the context of the absurd, the cosmic randomness and discord in which we are all suspended that makes our own systems of power and value seem utterly arbitrary and out of tune with the so-called universal order. Although Camus' characters are a motley crew and have little in common at the start of the story in terms of values, ideologies, or priorities, they discover that their only chance for survival will come through individual action that will contribute to a community-wide movement, and that they must commit to deeds that have no connection to their former social or economic agendas, but that allow them to comfort and commune together during the emergency. They find their individual humanity in a collective endeavor, but can sustain this greater purpose and productive energy only during the emergency. Once it subsides, they return to the coils, the skins of their old selves, their old quests for fame and fortune, and their own meaningless lives. Camus' argument is that we become our best selves during an existential crisis, when we shed our useless values in favor of life-affirming ones. We recognize the bond between ourself and our community. To get to your question then about whether we can choose goodness in modern society, absolutely, and so many of us do all the time. But it takes courage and teamwork. Doing individual actions virtuously often go unnoticed or have little impact on the machinery of power and profit that continue to churn. In Anne Applebaum's essay, History Will Judge the Complicit, she argues that it is simply easier to go along with corrupt and self-serving leaders, not to challenge or oppose them, and therefore earn a seat at the table and access to all the material bounty that power confers. It's very difficult to refuse the luxuries, privileges, and opportunities that come from signing a deal with the devil. There's nothing easy about finding a principled position and sticking to it, especially when you're the only one doing it. In general, resistance does not grease the wheels of success. Conformity, complacency, and complicity do. Yet, some of us do retain a desire to connect with our fellow humans and to struggle against the systems of power and privilege that feed plump grapes to some while denying so much as even air to others. In 2010, famed chef and restaurateur Jose Andres founded World Central Kitchen, following the devastating earthquake in Haiti, which was and remains the world's poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere. Like the characters in The Plague, Andres and his crew snapped into action not only to provide nourishment to the homeless and starving, but to connect with them at the most foundational level of dignity and humanity. World Central Kitchen is far more than a mobile pantry. It relies on local cooks, restaurants, food trucks, suppliers, and volunteers to prepare fresh meals quickly and at scale, and provides a glimpse of a functioning food economy where there had previously been none. World Central Kitchen has responded to natural disasters, including Hurricane Maria in 2017 that devastated Puerto Rico, pandemics such as COVID-19 by rushing food to frontline workers, wildfires such as recently in California and Maui, and conflict areas, especially to the refugee settlements in Ukraine and Gaza. Just as Enlightenment philosophers and politicians argued that life and liberty were natural and unalienable rights, World Central Kitchen argues that food is a universal human right. and seeks to rush fresh and nutritious food to anyone in any place that has been cut off due to natural disaster or humanitarian crisis. Similar to the mission of World Central Kitchen, there have been several nonprofit, non-governmental, without borders organizations that have played critical roles and provided essential aid during emergencies. Doctors Without Borders, which was founded in France in 1971 by doctors and journalists who believe that medical care and reporting on human suffering and injustice must go hand in hand. In the plague, one of Dr. Roux's chief allies is a journalist named Rambert, and although he's unable to do formal reporting while in the midst of the emergency, he and Dr. Roux both survive and can bear witness to support future communities elsewhere that may experience a similar catastrophe. In addition to providing emergency medical care in war zones, Doctors Without Borders aid refugee communities displaced by the conflict. They respond to epidemics and malnutrition. They provide vaccines and essential medications, and they provide mental health support. They were in Rwanda during the genocide. They were in Ethiopia during the famine, in Syria during the civil war, and in West Africa during the Ebola outbreak, in addition to war zones in Yemen, Sudan, Gaza, and Ukraine. For their humanitarian work, they were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1999, but Doctors Without Borders dedicate themselves to their work despite the risks, not for medallions, but because they recognize that their action alone can save lives. Similar Without Borders organizations have sprung up in the past few decades, including Reporters Without Borders who push for freedom of the press and protections for journalists, Engineers Without Borders who help build clean water and sanitation and energy infrastructure, Translators Without Borders who serve and represent indigenous communities during public health campaigns and refugee crises, and my personal favorite, Libraries Without Borders that promote education and literacy for displaced and underserved communities. Each group brings skilled experts from around the world quickly to peoples and places that might be otherwise doomed or forgotten, rather than humanitarian organizations being local or national, that is, in support of one group or a single people. These are global, reminding us that humans are an interconnected species and are better together during crisis than apart or alone. Thank you for your question, and thanks again for your votes, your notes, and your dedication to this campaign. I'm not fit for national office, but I might be a good candidate for future campaigns to make the humanities great again. Toodaloo!